Good evening, everyone. Ben here, and today we are looking at three more Senate elections, just because I feel like doing three today. Happy Memorial Day to everyone. Sorry I'm recording this and uploading this a bit late in the day. I spent most of the day making ribs, because what else am I going to do? Come on. It's Memorial Day. I'm going to enjoy a lot of food, beer, stuff like that. Anyway, now that I'm done with all that and got nothing better to do, I'm actually recording a video for you guys. Anyway, so now that I've wasted about 30-40 seconds, let's start by talking about Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, and I'm going to look at their primary, which already happened, and their incumbent Senator Bob Casey is running up against Lou Barletta. And in the primaries, he got about 60,000 votes more on the Democrat side. In the general, are there enough votes to overcome that in the Keystone State? Obviously. You have to remember this was a state that had, I think it was close to 6 million votes. Actually, I think they passed 6 million votes in the 2016 presidential election, so there's obviously enough. And in Pennsylvania, I believe there are more registered Democrats than there are registered Republicans, and they're a closed primary state. I actually want to check just to make sure. And never mind, I'll worry about that some other time. Which, by the way, that's actually going to factor in when we get to some talking about some things, because it does actually matter. But in the general election, polling indicates that Bob Casey does have an advantage. That said, it's not outside of where I would consider, especially with that large undecided vote in these two. However, in the only one without a gigantic amount of undecideds, SurveyMonkey Axios, again, I think the Axios polling indicates I think Axios methodology favors the Republicans a tiny bit. We'll have to see, obviously, in the future, but Bob Casey does hold a decent lead and is actually above 50%, so that's a thing. And in a Democrat PPP poll from March of this year, it's about where a generic Republican versus generic Democrat should be if you factor in undecided votes, where they probably should go, and still have a decent amount of undecideds, a more reasonable amount than 30% and 18%. Let's be honest, that isn't all going to go to the Democrat. That isn't all going to go to the Republican. It's going to be split somewhere in the middle, probably close to 60-40 for one candidate or another. I'm not sure which one, because it is Pennsylvania. It is a swing state. It is a state that looks likely. But with the amount of lead there is, it's way too easy for Bob Casey to cross 50% in this one. In this one, it's a little bit more difficult, but still 7 versus you have to reach 25 in order to win. Yeah, I think Bob Casey should have the advantage, and I'm going to go ahead and put it as a likely Democrat, not quite safe Democrat, where some people will have it. But that's just because of the large amount of undecideds. I want to wait until I have more polling to test this. Anyway, so we're going to move on. Before we get to Tennessee, we're going to talk about the state of Rhode Island. And that is, well, it should be fairly obvious. There hasn't been a primary yet. It should be solid Democrat. And honestly, the Republican candidates, from my research, are fairly weak, especially with an incumbent senator who is heavily favored in his own primary. That said, the poll is an internal poll from his campaign, so Lincoln Chafee should be a little bit higher than this. I'd say maybe 7 to 10% higher than that, but still not enough, especially even with 14% undecideds. You're still at 62% for Sheldon Whitehouse. That should essentially ensure the White House is going to win re-election. So I'm not even going to really bother with that, and I'm going to go ahead and put that as solid Democrat. And now, as you can see, it's basically undecided, or it's basically even in the Senate races. But let's look at, we've got one more state we're going to cover, the volunteer state. And you have to remember, you got 1, 2, 3, all essentially sure things for the Republicans. You got 1, 2 sure things for the Democrats, 1, 2 probable Democrat seats, and I'd say, excluding Tennessee, 1 that is really, really close. But we'll get to that when we get to West Virginia. The Mountain State is very weird. That's the first thing I will say about that. And as somebody who lives near the Mountain State, I literally could drive about maybe 30 minutes and I'm in West Virginia. So I actually feel a little more qualified than I normally would to talk about West Virginia elections. And of course, I definitely think I'm qualified to talk about Virginia elections, considering I live here. Now, I've lived in all 3 parts of the state: Nova, Tidewater, and coal country. And currently I'm living in coal country, and I love it here. But that's beside the point. Anyway, so we're going to go to Tennessee, which does have its own coal country part. If we look at a map here, I've been through Tennessee. It's a great state. You got 3 regions. You got the river area, you got the central part of the state, and then you got coal country Appalachia. And anyone who says it the other way, the wrong way, is wrong. It's Appalachia and Appalachian, not whatever other people say. Anyway, so those are 3 regions of Tennessee, and it's a very conservative state to begin with. And when are the primaries? Yeah, by the way, Bob Corker retired from the Senate, and that's why this seat is open and why it's getting a lot more talk than it probably would, and I honestly think should get in this cycle. You've got Marsha Blackburn, U.S. Representative, who is the favorite to win the Republican primary, and Aaron Pettigrew, who is a person in Tennessee. That's about all I can find out. He doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. Bob Corker, he's the incumbent, and he honestly, and he's retiring. I actually really liked him. I thought he would have been a great pick for vice president. Would have given Trump some bona fide conservative credentials without the Mike Pence-ness. Though Mike Pence was a good choice as well. I thought Corker was slightly better and would give a little bit of Southern charm to the Trump ticket. I think Trump would have actually done better with Corker. Maybe even picked up Minnesota. But that's neither here nor there. It didn't happen. And you got a few other people. You have somewhere. There's some good. I forgot about that. I honestly forgot that Peyton Manning. Was linked to the Senate seat to replace Corker. That was the funniest darn thing. Yeah, and going through this, of course, Marsha Blackburn is the only person, but she's got a lot of support, a lot of local support. Obviously, as a Republican, she's going to get that. Really? Okay. Well, okay, that's not that great. I thought they were just a woman's candidate advocacy group, which normally don't support Republicans, even women. But now that I read that, never mind. That makes perfect sense. Bleh. Okay, that makes. Okay, her endorsements make sense. And in the primaries, she is definitely favored over just about anyone, including Bob Corker. But a lot of this is internal polling from certain groups. Democrat primary should be interesting. If I remember correctly, Tennessee still has more registered Democrats than Republicans. But that's a byproduct of what was once called Solid South. A lot of them vote Republican now. And actually, I think I'm going to do a video on the supposed party flip because it's not as simple as a lot of people make it. And there's a lot less truth to it than a lot of Democrats would believe. But there's also a little truth, but it's not quite the truth Democrats would like. Let's just say the party flip was extremely that a party shift occurred, and that's a lot more complicated than I think a lot of people are willing to accept. And like I said, a lot of southern states still have a lot more registered Democrats than Republicans, but a lot of them are what would be called blue dog Democrats or conservative Democrats, and they tend to vote Republican at the national level. Certain local Democrats they still vote for. We'll probably get to that more when we cover West Virginia, because West Virginia is a prime example of that. Anyway, for the Democrat primary, you got Phil Bredesen, former governor. He was governor as recently as 2011, if I remember correctly. He was also former mayor in Nashville. From what I've heard from people from Tennessee, he's fairly well liked. He's your typical Southern Democrat, pretty conservative, supports a New Deal, but culturally conservative. I guess that's the best way to put it. Supports a New Deal when it comes to economics, and is a big supporter of unions, coal, and industry, but culturally they love God and they love their guns. To put it one way, and that's something we love down here, and that's something in the South that is prevalent. Two constants, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, is God and guns. It's not rare for a Democrat who votes Democrat across the board to be an avid hunter and even own some guns that make Los Angeles or Illinois Democrats cringe. I know Democrats I know registered Democrats who have concealed carry permits. Just to give you a taste of what it means to be a Democrat in the South. As far as I can tell, is somebody who isn't a Democrat, who has never been a Democrat, who probably will never be a Democrat. Especially with the way part of the party wants to go. Looking at some declined candidates. Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot Tim McGraw. Honestly, I think that rubs a lot of country music fans the wrong way, is that he considers himself a Democrat. But But Phil Bredesen does have some support. And, that's to be expected. It's updated. A lot of people still say it leans. In recent days, that's an old poll. It's also Democrat associated, and it's only 3 points ahead. SurveyMonkey Axios, 1 point ahead in a mostly Republican state without an incumbent in a good Democrat year, with 5% undecided who will probably break Republican for the most part. I'm counting that as Marsha Blackburn ahead. I'm counting this as basically equal, with Blackburn maybe slightly ahead due to undecideds and the fact that this is an internal poll. Mason-Dixon showed at 3 points with 11% undecided. I'm considering this dead equal. A Bredesen campaign showed 10 points ahead with 8 undecided. I'm considering this dead equal because it's an internal poll and a lot of undecideds. Middle Tennessee State University, that's 10 points ahead with 17 undecided. Honestly, I'm considering that dead equal. Internal poll, only 5% ahead, 13% undecided. Again, that's dead equal. Republican, I'm considering this one about equal, maybe a slight Blackburn lead, but not 5%, maybe 2. I'm not going to go with anything from 2017. Republican aligned poll shows Bredesen ahead, so that should be read as Bredesen ahead. Triton Research shows Blackburn ahead, but again, that's from January. And that's an unaligned poll, so that should be read as Blackburn ahead by a decent amount. So as we've seen, it's gotten narrower. I'll be honest, it's gotten a lot narrower. But the generic ballot in recent days has gotten below the amount that I think Democrats will need to even take the House. So I really don't think this seat is as winnable for Democrats as they'd like to believe. But it's not as safe as Republicans would want. In generic Republican versus generic Democrat, the Democrat aligned, a Democrat internal poll shows that the state generally wants a Republican by a healthy amount. This Republican one internal poll showed that Corker would lose. We're going to ignore this one. Tennessee Star, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, okay. The PPP shows Corker ahead, and remember PPP is generally favored. But that's from 2017. PPP is generally Democrat, but it's consistent, it's usable. Just remember they tend to overrepresent Democrats, but not by a huge amount. And again, it's not as bad as Rasmussen with Republicans, okay? Gravis Marketing showed Peyton. Again, this is from 2017, back when the Peyton Manning for Senate thing was actually a thing. Showed Peyton Manning ahead. Yeah, okay, fair enough. College football is a religion in the South. That's not a joke, by the way. That is not a joke. So I am going to lean this Republican for the simple reason that you need to always look at who did the poll. Because if you don't look at who did the poll and whether it was on behalf of a party or a campaign, you're going to assume things from polling that maybe you shouldn't. Because Republican aligned polls are going to look at a few things. They're going to say, okay, we're going to assume the best possible scenario for us. So we're going to assume lots of non-college educated whites which is true in Tennessee, by the way. We're going to assume low minority turnout. We're going to assume that there is depressed turnout. And we're going to assume that our base turns out. So lots of religious people. And in the South, that typically means evangelicals. Catholics are starting to be very competitive. Catholics are becoming a more competitive group. Democrat polls, on the other hand, they're going to assume higher college-educated white turnout, higher minority turnout, increased turnout in general, and maybe fewer evangelical Christians. Whereas a non-aligned pollster or a pollster who's actually trying to accurately predict the election for the general public and report the election instead of trying to report to a campaign is going to look at things and say, okay, well, what is turnout likely to be based off of these factors? Where are these demographics going to be turning out? So that's why I'm putting Tennessee in the leans Republican column. But also because I really think that it's not as competitive as Democrats want to believe. Especially with the generic ballot and President Trump's approval rate and increasing in favorability for the Republicans and Trump. And part of that's just because of the general strength of the U.S. economy. It's being more and more increasingly attributed to the Trump administration and Republicans. But there's also maybe the people are souring on the whole anti-Trump resistance movement. And when I start covering the political parties and that type of thing, I'm probably going to actually talk about that because, and I'm going to start that whole series and idea tomorrow because, number one, I want to, but also because I think it's going to be beneficial. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed, and tomorrow we're going to start talking about the parties. We're going to start with the Democrats because they're the opposition party. Then next Tuesday we're going to do the Republicans. The week after that we're going to do the Libertarians. I might do the Greens, or I might start talking about political movements in the United States. For example, the Tea Party, the religious right, the progressive movement, and groups like that. Start covering those weekly as well. Anyway, y'all, take it easy. Enjoy the rest of your Memorial Day, and y'all have a nice week. Or, well, at least until tomorrow. No, seriously, though, have a nice week and have a nice evening. Enjoy yourselves.